Hey, I'm April.
I'm Bayleigh, and this is the Nestled Podcast.
Here we chat about how to help design meet purpose. Our hope is that you will find inspiration to live more intentionally.
So join us each week as we let you peek in our nest.
And as always, the door will be open.
Hey everybody!
Hey, I'm April.
I'm Bayleigh.
Welcome to the Nestled Podcast.
We are so glad to have you back with us. We wanted to say thank you to everybody for all of the feedback from our holiday episodes.
We have heard from so many of you that you were encouraged and that you were even a little bit inspired, which always makes us feel like what we're doing matters, to really evaluate what you're doing this holiday season. And we hope that you are making the most of these days.
Mm-hmm. Doing the best that you can, and give yourself some grace and give everyone around you grace. I hope that you guys took that away from the holiday episodes. We did not want to sound like we were harping.
But or just that we have it all together.
No, because we don't.
We do not.
So for us, in thinking about giving ourselves grace, we have the Christmas stuff that we love. And also, we do the Candle Candle Advent song. We've done the Advent song once. And I mean, my kids were like counting down the days to December to start this. And we've been so busy. It's happened once. And our dove has gone out on 2 flights. And today my 5-year-old said, Mom, I'm really hoping that Daisy will go on a flight today. And I mean, she 100% knows that it's me. So
basically, she was like, Mom, I'm hoping that you'll give Daisy a new card
I'm
today.
hoping you will take the time to put a card in
all of the work that it takes for you to put that card there.
So we can find somebody to help.
Yeah.
So.
Well, our Advent candles, I got new candles this year because my old ones got broken in the move. And they've not been lit yet because the best we can do so far is do our Advent guide on the way to school. And there's no candle lighting happening in the car on the way to school.
But you know what? When those kids get out next week, we're going to have a good 5 days that we can really hit.
We're going to anticipate Jesus coming so hard.
That's right.
Before Christmas. Also, we were laughing before we started because talking about failures that we've had, there's a big party going on this weekend where a family in our church invites people from literally all over the world to what they have deemed the meat party. And it's like you only bring meat. Only bring meat. Or sides that like have bacon in them kind of deal. And I invited a couple of Lydia's friends' parents. And the response was, well, she's a vegetarian. So that's how I'm doing with reaching out to that family right now.
Probably the meat party wasn't the ideal.
And so I was like, well, maybe I can bring a side that you can eat. And I text the family that's hosting it, and she was like, we'll have fish. And anyway, she does eat fish, so maybe they'll still come. But I just thought of all things to offend a family that you're really trying to love on is to invite them to a party of only meat.
When they're vegetarian.
When you're a vegetarian.
That's pretty fast.
So, yeah, give yourself grace. We're all just doing the best that we can. And we actually had this interview with Rachael Kincaid several weeks ago, and we spent a good 25 minutes chatting with her before we asked her the first question that we planned to ask her. But as we listened back, it was just a really honest and encouraging conversation. Yeah. As we listened back to it, I was like, I'm so glad we talked to her. It was good for our hearts and our souls, and so we thought you guys would want to hear it too.
Yep, so today y'all get to hear the whole pre-interview that we did with Rachael Kincaid, and we hope that you love it and that you're so encouraged by it, and we hope that you'll follow her on Instagram because she's a great
follow, and next week you'll get part 2 that's the actual interview that we intended to have with her.
Yep, so here's Rachael.
Hey everyone, we're so excited to have with us today Rachael Kincaid. You may know her as Rach Kincaid on Instagram, and she started Get After Grateful, and we're so excited to hear from her today. How are you, Rachael?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Absolutely. So my name is Rachael. I tend to go by Rach because my name is spelled a little funky. And I live in South Carolina, right on the state line of North Carolina. My husband and I have 3 acres and 6 kids and some chickens. And it's a fun, wild life, that's for sure.
What are the age ranges of your 6 kids?
So my husband brought 2 into our marriage, and I was 19 when we started dating. So I was like an instant stepmom at 19, which is kind of weird. But they are currently 18 and 16. So
Okay.
it's just such a fun thing to watch them. I've watched them grow up. I've actually grown up with them. So I got them when they were 2 and 4. And then when my husband and I got married, we were pregnant within the first month of marriage. And then we had 4 kids in 3 years. So our younger group is 9, twin 7-year-olds, and 5.
I bet you had a rough few years, but it paid off now, huh?
I did. It was a blur. I know for sure somebody, when I was pregnant with the twins, told me to take a lot of photos because I wouldn't remember their first year of life. And I can look back and say I actually don't remember the first 3 to 4 years. My favorite story to kind of explain that is that I'm a nurse and I am very health focused. I mean, I love junk food and Big Macs and all that, but health focused as far as preventative wellness and all that. And when my son was 4, my baby son was 4, I realized I had never brushed his teeth. I had just like put him to bed every night, and I had, 3 girls underneath him, and I said, I think I'm supposed to worry about oral health at some point during your life. So I started brushing his teeth every night, and when we finally went to the dentist for the first time, none of the little kids had any problems, but he had 4, 5, 6 cavities because I was like, I forgot that he had teeth.
I forgot to brush his teeth.
I'm sorry. What can I say?
We got back on track, but those first few years were very blurry, that's for sure.
That's so relatable, though.
Yes. And my youngest is 6. I'm kind of coming out of those really, exhausting early days. I mean, they're exhausting in a different way now. My oldest is 14. And I forget how much you really are just kind of surviving. You don't really know what you're doing. And then every once in a while, I'll see a young mom with, there's a lady at our school who has 5 kids, and I see her with her little stroller and all of her little kids, and I'm always like, man, that lady has so many kids.
Same amount.
I have the same number of kids. But it doesn't feel that way now because all of mine can walk and talk, and, it's just funny. You don't
and
realize.
And yours are stair steps. You look just like that.
Yeah. It's just funny how far, when you removed, you get from it.
So quickly.
And then you're like, I don't even remember that life.
It feels so easy now because they lay out their clothes the night before school. They all brush their own teeth and take care of themselves. And we enjoy going to the grocery store or random things that used to be torturous. We enjoy that now.
Right.
So when people say that, like, oh my gosh, there's so many kids, I'm like, it's so easy. I really feel like I have so much time and space and personal, margin, just because they're out. My baby's 5 now, so she's in kindergarten. Like right now, I'm home alone. I feel like an empty nester.
Like I have all this time to myself, 5 hours a day.
Well, you're normally in school, right?
I am. So I work full time as a nurse. I'm in hospice care, so I take care of folks at the end of life. I do 3 12-hour shifts a week with that, and I'm also in school full time, which is a 3-year doctoral program. So I'm trying to get my doctorate in order to become a nurse practitioner, and I'll work with adults and then the geriatric population because I love old people so much. So I'm currently on winter break, which gives me 2 to 3 days a week when the kids are in school that I don't have anything to do, and I feel like I'm on vacation. I already told y'all, but I guess I'll tell the listeners. I'm in my robe right now. So I'm at a spa. Yeah, it's amazing.
That is a really special calling, I would say, to do what you do, but I could imagine that it helps you to keep a very fresh perspective on the vapor that is life.
Yeah. So when I was younger in nursing school, newlywed, I for sure wanted to be a midwife. I was obsessed with birth and home birth and cloth diapers and the whole shebang. I went down that rabbit hole for several years and just knew that I was going to do that. I was going to help women bring life into the world, and very quickly realized that there's only one demographic, and that is women of childbearing age. And I would get bored so easily just thinking about, women and labor, and it's just a lot of drama all the time in a good way because I loved it myself. But so I fell in love while taking care of patients at the hospital at my first or second nursing job out of school. I fell in love with the older, fragile folks that were getting towards the end. And for some reason, I just fell into the groove where the nurse or my manager would put me with the families that were having to make really difficult decisions about whether or not they pursued any more aggressive treatment for for their disease, or, an old person with Alzheimer's, dementia, are they able to live at home anymore? Do we have to talk about placement? I just fell in love with it. And I wrote a blog post in my earlier days of blogging called Just Be Tired with Him, when I talked about telling a woman that her husband was dying because she didn't realize it. She was in her 80s. She was talking about, when he gets out of the hospital, I'm going to find a nursing home and we're going to get him better and I'm going to bring him home with me. And at one point I looked at her and I said, I want you to sit with me for a minute and just stare at him and tell me what you see. And then she looked back at me and she was like, he's going, isn't he? And it was so painful, but also so beautiful that I was able to say in the moment, stop looking at the future, just look right now. And I got hooked. I mean, it was just like this thin space between heaven and earth, and this power that families have in that moment to make decisions for their loved ones that really honor them and give them what they want at the end of life. So hospice feels like a sweet spot in the middle of highly medicalized, fast-paced technology that is Western medicine, where with hospice care, folks come to me with bad news, meaning somebody can't fix their cancer or their dementia is irreversible or whatever. And I get to say, but we have all of these options. So it's not the end of the road. It's just a new direction. And my favorite stories are the ones where the women say, I hope this isn't too much for your listeners, but they'll say, like, I want to be intimate with my husband one more time. How do we do that pain-free? And I get to come up with solutions for creams or whatever. Or an old lady who wants to take her grandkids to the beach, and so I get her a 4-wheel drive wheelchair. Like, that stuff is fun. It's not sad as much as it is sacred. So I love it. And I hope that isn't like a downer, but it's just such a sweet thing for me to spend my time doing. If I'm going to be away from my kids, I want it to be impactful.
Yeah. We had a moment that we've shared a little bit about on our podcast with one of our neighbors when her husband went into cardiac arrest in their house, and we brought her to the hospital. We knew he had died, but she didn't realize it yet. And so we were with her when she found out. And there is something so sacred about being in that moment when it's not your moment. You know what I mean? I mean, very difficult, but it's what an honor.
Yeah.
So I can see how you fall in love with it for sure. It's hard.
Yeah.
Really
it
hard.
Is. I had a rough day the other day, and my husband just transitioned. We just transitioned churches. He's in a new role, and I know it's difficult for him emotionally. Just like any time you leave a church and go to a new one, we always joke it's like breaking up with your boyfriend.
It is hard. Yeah, it is.
Because you're like, I love you so much, but God's called me somewhere else. But I still love you. But where are my new friends? Can I keep my old friends? I mean, it's a whole thing. But I came home from work, and he had a long day, but he was just so filled and so happy and joyful, and he's a comedian, and he's just the laid back version to my very uptight personality, and I felt very empty. And so I'm looking at him and I said, I think I need a moment to myself. I'm going to go take a bath, do something before I interact with the kids, 15-minute downtime. He was like, take all the time you need. And it hit me when I got alone that I was like, oh, I have a hard job. Like, people are dying with me all day, every day. I'm not leading worship on stage and watching people respond in a different way. So it's powerful. I love it, but it is hard. And it's really helpful for me to remember that so I can take care of myself. Just the healthy version of me needs to be able to have boundaries and different routines that kind of help me recover from that. But it is definitely a calling, and I'm so glad that God called me to it for sure.
Do you think seeing people in their hardest moments kind of helped inspire your Get After Grateful hashtag?
Oh, that's a really great point. I think I was transitioning into this role when I started the hashtag. I know that I was coming out of, my third season of postpartum depression, because like clockwork, I have around 6 to 8 months after I have babies, I get really down for about 5 to 6 months. It usually requires counseling and reevaluating of my schedule and things like that. So I know I was coming out of one of those seasons. Yes. And I had just changed jobs to hospice. And so it was more about seeing a lot of people online come up with like thankful lists and all the decorations that we couldn't afford to put up in our home and all these different things that kind of made me feel a little bit resentful. But then I was also like, no, gratitude is a posture of the heart, and you can do that at any point in time. So I vividly remember I also had, which is so strange, a year after having babies, I was still having these postpartum headaches that would last me like 24 hours. If I woke up with one, it was just there all day. And it wasn't like a migraine. It was, I could function through it. But I remember feeling this cloud, and I kept telling my husband, it feels like there's smoke in my head. Like I can't think straight. I feel grumpy. There's this dull pain in my head. And we finally got all my hormone stuff worked out over the years. But in the moment, I remember saying, I can choose to be grateful, or I can choose to bring everybody around me down with me.
Right.
Because I'm good with words. I'm witty. I'm quick on my feet. That's what makes me a good nurse and an effective communicator. But I could also just like take the whole house of cards down with one comment, and I don't want to be that person, you know? So the idea of who am I thinking and what do I do when it's hard became a daily mantra of sorts, where I was choosing in the moment to press a reset button and kind of start over. And I do that in my work for sure, because it's hard to leave a house where everybody's crying or someone's just died or someone knows they're going to die, and then I have to go positively into my next visit, or pull into the elementary school and watch my kids do a Christmas concert. I have to be able to turn that on and off quickly. So yeah, I'm sure. Thank you for pointing that out. That's so beautiful. It coincided very quickly with that job. So yeah, it's been really remarkable to be able to use a hashtag or click on the hashtag and see other people doing their own version of that. Who am I thinking and why, and what happens when it's not easy.
I like that you said how you realized how quickly what was happening in your day was affecting everything around you. We've talked about this before, how we've realized, especially as mothers, how we can control the environment in our home so easily with our attitudes, and how all of a sudden I start seeing everyone, Bayleigh told a story about this, but everyone's like at each other, and you're like, I don't know why everybody's being so mean. And then you realize, oh, I'm in the worst mood. Yeah. And I've been barking out orders, and then like just stepping back and saying, like, I can choose to not let whatever is on me affect the way that I'm reacting to things right now. And it really does change the environment of your home. It also changes the environment of whoever you're around. You have that power to really create a space where people can rest, a space where people can feel like it's not heavy, they feel like they can just breathe, and that we get to offer that to people.
I love it. I know my family at one point said, my husband was trying to be gentle, but he said, we are walking on eggshells around you. And that's something that we're, as a family, going to need to address.
Right.
So I don't want you to feel like I'm speaking death over you, or when you come in, you ruin everybody's mood or the temperature changes, but like it is powerful, whether that be unhappy at my job or postpartum depression or the way I just carry stuff, man. I'll read like headlines in the news and I feel this weird weight, and not even like depressed, I need to turn off the news weight, but I hope this doesn't sound crazy. I wake up every morning thinking I can change the world. Like, not I'm going to be the president, or I'm going to be famous, or I'm going to write a book, but just like in my interactions, I'm like, we have the power to change the world. And so I guess alternatively, I feel the weight of it when something goes wrong, or I see a headline that makes me sad. I'm like, man, the world is broken. But I do have a hope. I do have an eternal hope that I can influence the world around me with, but it goes both ways for sure.
Yeah. My husband recently, it was about a week ago, said, Bayleigh, we had left a place, and he is very shy and introverted, and he is a peacekeeper, and I'm a peacemaker, I think is the difference. But, or I say I'm a peacemaker, I try to be. But he said, Bayleigh, you've got to be careful with your words, because when you get upset about something, you very quietly make the whole room start to riot. He said, I look over and I realize you've said something to this person and you've said something to this person. He said, you're not screaming about it, but suddenly everybody's on your team about this injustice. And he was like, if I get a call from you that you've been arrested because you started a riot, I wouldn't be shocked. And I was like, man. Okay, well, I'll think about that. Thanks.
And thanks for that. Sometimes that's important to do.
Yes, right. It is. I think we just have to be careful that, like, the inconvenience of IKEA isn't the time to make everybody else get upset with us. But, like,
sure.
Yeah. The thing that I loved about the Get After Grateful and what made me ask you that question is, I know April and I tried to well, I say we try to. We just kind of intentionally do it by trying to pursue people. But we find ourselves inserting ourselves into people's heart very often.
Yeah.
And what the weight of that does is I can unfairly sometimes get really frustrated then with the people who aren't doing that but are complaining about all the little inconveniences. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not a big deal. That is not a big deal. Think you've got this and you've got this and you've got this.
How often do we say, you're not having, that's not a bad day.
That's not a bad day.
Like, the bad day is the day that your husband just had a heart attack and died in your home. Like, that's a bad day.
Right.
This is not a bad day, whatever it might be.
And so I love the Get After Grateful, because I feel like that's kind of our heartbeat, too. It's like, you're alive today. We can find something to be thankful for, you know?
Yeah, and it's hard to draw the line. I think it's important to have boundaries with what I allow myself to carry regarding other people, regarding what I see on the internet. But then also, if I become too militant about it, like, I'm not going to lie down and take a rest because someday I really will need to lie down and take a rest. That is what works me into a striving versus working from a place of rest kind of mentality with my relationship with God. And then I become like a performance-based follower of Jesus really quickly. So then it's both and. It's like, this is a really hard day. Also, I've lived harder. Also, I will live harder in the future. So it's just a beautiful way to kind of, in the moment, what is mine to carry? The kids brought home this really cool saying from their guidance counselor a few years ago, I think it was. I think my eldest young son, I have two groups of kids, I like to say. Well, I was probably in kindergarten, so it's been a few years now. But he said I can choose to notice my worries, and then I can choose to lay them down. And I was, for so long, laying them down too quickly. I don't think I was holding them or creating space to pay attention to my feelings or to pay attention to what was hard. It is hard to go back to work 4 weeks postpartum and pumping on a toilet. Like, that is hard. Yeah. It is hard to not have enough money to do X, Y, or Z. But also, I'm not homeless. And also, I have been through worse and I will go through worse. Also, both of my parents are still alive and they live down the street. So, like, what can I find in the moment to say, like, the going back to work at 4 weeks was really difficult. Also, my mom brought the baby to me to nurse. So, like, it's both and, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I think for me to be able to take the things that I know I need to let rest on me, but then also being wise and taking things to the Lord and letting some things go, because I have a tendency to carry all the things. And then I find myself like frustrated with everyone else because I'm like, you think that you have so much, look at this list of all the things that I'm doing, and then I'm feeling all the weight of, there was a time I walked into the school office and I could tell that the secretary was upset about something, and it had nothing to do with me. I walked into it that way, but I'm like feeling like then I'm an inconvenience, and I walked out of there so heavy and felt like I was going to take that. It was going to, like I had I don't know. It was just this weird like moment that the Holy Spirit was like, you didn't have to take that. Like her bad day, you didn't have to carry that as a burden for the rest of your day now that you feel like she treated you badly, but it hurt your feelings or whatever it is that happens, you can let that go. And then you can choose to be grateful and have a good day. Like, you don't have to take that on. So I think there's like you're saying, it's a both and. Like, we have to know and have the wisdom in taking things to the Lord and saying, like, is this my burden to carry? Or is this something that I just need to lay down? Because there is some tension that we need to rest in and let it really change our hearts. But then there are also things that we need to process through quickly and move on.
You're right. And the only way you can learn that is by spending time with God in his scriptures, or reading the news, and or filling out power sheets or whatever goal setting stuff that you have, so that like, I feel like it's so silly when I say this, but I have a vision statement or a mission statement for literally everything I do in my life, like down to how I dress or how I wear my hair or what I commit to at the kids' school, because then I can very quickly in the moment process it. So I had an experience kind of similar to what you were talking about just the other day with a group of nurses I was talking to, and one of them I felt like wasn't giving me the eye contact or engaging me the way I wanted, and I was like, what did I do to make that person not like me? And I was like, wait. I didn't do anything wrong. I prayed. I asked the Holy Spirit for conviction. Did I say anything off color? Did I hurt anybody's feelings? No. Then I will leave it in this building when I walk out, because I do care about everything from immigration to my lost family members to my husband's new job. Like, I care about all these things. So like that I cannot care about. That would be disobedient to care about.
Yes.
I think it's important to remember, when you were talking about having a mission statement, it reminded me of this, but words matter. The things we say to ourselves matter. The things we're listening to matters. Things that we're reading matter. So let's read and listen and say things of importance, and then the other stuff, just let it go.
Right. It's just important to have something to filter everything through.
Oh man, yeah. I think I reevaluate like who I'm following on Instagram every 3 or 4 months, and I decide what I'm allowed to listen to music wise every few months. Not even because like what would be sinful, but it's like not everything is beneficial. So what would be beneficial for me in my season?
Right.
There's a really popular podcast. Obviously, I'm not going to say what it is. But a lot of people have said, oh, you would love that podcast. And I tried listening to it, and my conclusion was, they're really funny, but I think they're pretty mean. And my tendency can be to be, my humor, I think, sometimes can cut people down. And so I have to pray through that and work on that constantly. So the last thing I need is to be laughing at people.
Cutting people down. Yeah.
That is so good and self-aware. That is so good. I've been reading a lot about women's issues, specifically in relation to the Bible, and translating what different parts of Scripture mean about women, and even reading secular stuff about feminism and how that started and what that means. And so I know where my boundaries are, because I do believe that God created me for a very certain role, different from a man's role. I have no problem with that. So I know who I can and cannot listen to in that topic, because I don't want to like slide down a slippery slope and then turn into something that does become sinful or prideful. So I think that's really good to know not even your weak spots, but like, where do you have an issue or insecurity or something that the Lord is working on in your heart, and you need to know how to protect that as you grow.
Right. Well, I can laugh at myself, and I forget everyone doesn't think it's funny to be laughed at, and so that's something I had to learn, is like, I've hurt people with something that I didn't mean any malice by, and so I've had to try to be really conscious to cut that out.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
I think that there's so much good as women to hear from one another. I think that these are really, really important things for us to think about.
We hope that you guys enjoyed listening to all Rachel had to say. She's one of those people we walked away saying, I wish she lived closer so we could meet with her on a regular basis, because we were definitely encouraged. If you in this season are looking for ways to make yourself feel a little extra grateful, search her hashtag that she started. It's #GetAfterGrateful, and people post some great things on there.
Yeah, and I hope that we all can kind of evaluate our yeses and our nos this season, and that's something that we are constantly encouraging you to do. But also, just after listening to this, I think that I am going to take a minute to think about how powerful my words are, and the words that I use to speak to other people, also the words that I'm using to speak to myself, and that it matters, and that we will all be gracious with one another and with ourselves this holiday season.
Keep in mind, we're all just doing the best we can.
Yes.
You can find Rachel on Instagram at Rachael Kincaid. She'll talk more about where to find her on the internet at the end of next week's episode when you hear the end of the actual interview. But in case any of you aren't following her and wanted to find her, we wanted to make sure we put that out there. You can also find us on Instagram at Nestled Podcast, and you can find our website at nestledpodcast.com.
As always, we thank you for taking a peek in our nest.
We hope you come back next week. As always, our door will be open.